Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
Just not always the same ones. I feel like one of these times you're going to be Lin-Manuel Miranda and you're going to rap the beginning of this.
No one wants that.
No, especially not me. Who are you?
I'm Steve Aiken. I'm the editor of Fine Gardening Magazine.
I'm Danielle Sherry. I am the senior editor of Fine Gardening Magazine.
Nice to meet you.
Who is also not going to rap at the top of this this episode. But today we're going to talk about architectural plants. And it's kind of, we've been listening to you guys talk. You want more design ideas for these plants that we're talking about, how to incorporate them into your garden. And I think one of the toughest things for me, Steve, was actually finding and planting architectural plants in my garden. But it's one of those things that I know that I didn't have enough of them because my garden was just like, meh. Is that like a good way to describe a garden without architectural plants?
Well, maybe we should describe what we mean by architectural plants.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I think it's...
It was your idea. You go for it. And I'll just tell you if I agree or not.
I just think something with a strong silhouette. That's what I always think. A strong presence, a strong silhouette. And by silhouette, I guess I'm thinking of habit primarily.
Yeah, like a distinctive form to it that has some presence.
Yeah. I'm on the same page with you.
That's good since we're about to do the show.
Do you have a lot of architectural plants?
I do not. Where I tend to use them is in my containers.
Okay.
But I need more. And as I was doing this, I'm like, I need more of this plant.
Yeah.
I need more of this plant. Why am I not growing this plant? Yeah.
Yeah. And I tend to fall back on, I've got trees in my landscape, so those are my architectural plants, but they're not necessarily architectural. Those are my bones of my garden, which is a totally different thing.
Most of the trees I have are just, all you really see are trunks.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically like having telephone poles in your garden. Yeah. They really don't add that much. Which is
another, look that I guess you could go for. Telephone pole look. Yeah. I've also found this to be a fun topic for us to do because, I feel like we tend to talk about the same plants a lot just because we've got experience with them. But this is an opportunity where I listed some plants that I've just fallen in love with other gardens that we've featured over the years. And, it might not work in my zone, but I feel like for the listeners, it'll work in their zones. And they just made a lasting impression.
Well, I think I've mentioned versions of all of these plants before.
Oh, all right.
So
we're going to go with me first.
Right, because, yeah.
So my first plant was the Sago Palm, which is Cycas revoluta. I think everybody knows what a sago palm is just because it's a very popular house plant as well. It's zones 9 to 10, but you can grow it in zone 8 with some protection. And I'll never forget when I saw the first one of these outside of houseplant land. And it was down in Florida, and I was visiting relatives down there, and it honestly just looked like a stegosaurus should come with it. It's this really, really cool, stiff-needled, dark green. There are varieties that are yellow-leaved palm fronds, and they kind of all grow in a whirl around this central brownish trunk. And it's just this really, really cool-looking palm, and it feels almost plastic when you touch it. I guess it can get up to 8 feet tall, but more typically it's in the 3 to 6 foot tall range, about 2 feet to 3 feet wide. And it's just a really cool plant that leaves a lasting impression. Very, very cool.
So how do you use them?
So how I've seen it used in one particular garden in Tiburon, California, that we actually featured in the magazine for a garden of textures. But what they used it as is kind of like that mid-range in the garden. You've got your layers, your back layer, your middle layer, your creepy crawlies down in the front, and they used it kind of in the middle as a focal point plant that it kind of sprung up like a firework in the midst of these kind of fine textured grasses, and it just really against the grasses stood out with this kind of palm tree looking silhouette to it. It was very striking.
So I'm disappointed,
Why?
Not in your choice of plants, but in that as I was doing my plants, I discovered they all kind of do the same thing in the landscape, and they do pretty much what you just said.
That like mid-range bulk.
Yeah, like on the small, not not a huge focal point,
Yeah.
but sort of like a smaller focal point, amidst small and medium-sized things that look good, erupting out of,
Oh, so
mounds of
that's why you
foliage.
rolled your eyes when I said fireworks. I'm like, why? Why are you giving me a hard time about fireworks?
Um,
So what do you have that
There's so
falls
many
into-
reasons I could have been rolling my eyes. I don't recall.
I know.
Yeah.
So what do you have that falls into that same range as the Sago Palm?
Well, something that's a little hardier,
Okay.
and most of my stuff is not that hardy, which is kind of a drag, but it's usually more tropical plants have the cooler forms.
I tend to agree with you
Yeah.
because let's see, I've got two out of my 4 plants are in that.
So last year, for the first time, I grew eucomis, which is pineapple lily. I grew
Okay.
sparkling burgundy pineapple lily, and it was wonderful. I've always admired this plant. It always looks cool wherever I've gone. And I went to a garden in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Frank Fitzgerald, you went there first, and he lives in Minneapolis and grows eucomis in pots.
Which is so weird because what are they typically zonal wise? They're zone 7?
There's zone 7. I've read some things that say 6B.
Okay.
But they're certainly not Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, how do you overwinter those? He's like, well, I just bring the pot inside. It's super easy. So I ordered some, bought some, planted them in my containers. They did great. And these plants have these like wide, strappy burgundy foliage. That sort of erupts out of the soil, and then in late summer it sends up a stalk with this pineapple cylindrically shaped cool flower on it. It's very striking, and that also is burgundy. It has shades of green in it as well, but it's hard not to notice these plants. Very striking, and they take a ho-hum combination or vignette or whatever and turn it into something really cool. Very easy to grow because I was successful with it. I'll let you know in a few months if it was easy to overwinter. But the thing about it is someone said, well, don't let them dry out because they'll fall over. And so mine had fallen over, and so, yeah.
Meaning like they get the flopsies,
Yeah, they
basically?
flop.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
But I watered them, and they stood back up for the most part.
Oh, all right.
And so, in flopping, one of the flowers crossed the pathway and had to be snipped. I brought it inside, and that thing lasted as a cut flower for months, not
Cool.
weeks, but like months.
Very
And it was
cool.
probably still lasting, and I just got tired of it and eventually threw it away. But it lasted for months. But just a wonderful thing for just a low pop of interest amidst ground covers or just some area that's meh or ho-hum.
And I don't think we talked about overall size on this. I mean, we said it was in the middle range, but
Less than 2 feet tall.
okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. So a little bit smaller than the Sago Palm.
Yeah.
But yeah.
A little more manageable.
Yeah, absolutely. And in containers, which is cool because you can have architectural plants in
you can
containers.
you can grow it in the ground too. No
Cool.
problem. Yeah.
Very cool. Hey, one thing I forgot to mention earlier, and I don't want to get letters on this, so I just want to say that a Sago Palm is toxic. So if you've got cats and dogs and children and rodents or anything that you don't want to get sick, watch out for the Sago Palm.
And then I guess I should also mention that a pineapple lily is not a pineapple and should not be eaten. Probably doesn't taste like a lily.
Doesn't. Flower looks like a pineapple, but definitely not edible. Well, that's interesting that you picked a pineapple lily because I picked something that I know you've grown in containers before, and I have too, and that is New Zealand Flax, which is Formium 10X. And I think you actually got those in our container for our container challenge this year. Did you get?
Those were cordylinis.
Oh,
Yeah.
cordylinis. So similar look. The New Zealand flax is 3 to 6 feet tall, 1 to 3 feet wide. It's big. It's a cordyline on steroids, basically.
Well, it doesn't have the trunk that a cordylini has. It's more like a thick grass.
Thick, very thick. So we're talking
Thick-bladed.
blades on this are, think of an ornamental grass, listeners, and then basically times 5. It's very, very thick blades. And they kind of have the same structure as an ornamental grass on steroids. They grow taller. They kind of swoop out. Fireworks again, and there's all sorts of different cultivars of this. The straight species is just kind of a burgundy purple color, maybe with a little hint of yellowy orange in its leaves. And again, just wow, so cool. It really gives you that form. From afar, you're thinking that can't be a grass. You know, it's way too big to be an ornamental grass, but it is, and it's awesome.
It doesn't strike me as a grass. By the way, the Let's Argue About Plants drinking game, every time you say on steroids, somebody has to take a drink.
Oh, yes. All right.
I didn't mean you.
Did it.
But I've seen these thick-bladed things down in San Diego, like 10, 12 feet tall. And I had to say, like, what are those really tall things that look like phormiums but aren't? Like, oh, no, those are phormiums. I had no idea they get that tall, because around here, you get 2 feet out of them in a season, you're lucky.
Yeah.
But they come in all sorts of, oranges and reds and yellows, stripes.
Bright pink, very cool. So on and so forth. I don't think that we mentioned that this is zones 8 to 11, so this is definitely something that I can't overwinter here in New England, but it's something that I've grown in a pot, taken inside. We all know that I hate to do that, and actually has done pretty well when just chopping it down to the ground, throwing it in the basement, making sure it stays somewhat moist, and then pulling it back out again. But I'm bummed, because if I lived zone 8 through 11, I would definitely have this in the ground.
Okay, so more for zones 8, which seems to be the sweet spot.
It seems to be the sweet spot, yeah.
Well, if you want to make a statement with a plant, it's hard to go wrong with elephant ears, colocasia. Black Magic is the go-to one of that. There are tons of other very cool varieties. But what you get are these long, maybe 2 foot long stalks with these elongated heart-shaped leaves on them that are themselves a good 1.5 foot
very big,
long, with distinct veins on them. Black Magic is almost pure deep burgundy to the point of black, with little bits of, like shades of green in there. Very, very cool plant. Needs a lot of water, can grow in standing water. It's a tropical plant, but just an amazing plant. And the way I like to use it, again, is in my containers, as people walk up to the house, to sort of announce that a plant person lives here. Because they're big and they're in your face, and they have that dinosaur-y type look, and people are impressed by that. And I think that's kind of cool, and they're kind of cool looking plants. And hard to go wrong with. Just keep them watered, keep them fed, and then overwintering them is pretty simple. I've overwintered them in the basement. You just keep them covered, and they do just fine. And then you bring them back out, and
and they're good to go the next year.
Yeah, and they multiply.
The one thing I will say about those is that it's almost like a vase-like habit, or a V-like
they go
habit.
up and out, kind of.
So a lot of times, it's one of those plants that you don't want to cover up the bare legs, because especially on Black Magic, you've got those dark purple stems that I think look really, really cool. So I hate always putting them in a mixed container, because then you don't get to see that really cool form.
If you have like a mass of a low-growing ground cover, having these come out from the middle of that looks amazing. It looks stunning, but really easy to grow. Tropical plant. They remind me of. I'm not going to say it. It's a Pink Floyd reference, but Steve mentioned classic rock. Somebody has to drink.
But but listen. I mean, it wouldn't be the podcast if we don't do a reference from Steve. Come on.
Okay, so in the movie of The Wall, the drawings of the mother, she has sort of like this heart-shaped face, a really bizarre-looking face, and so it kind of looks like a colocasia leaf.
Okay, all right. Yeah. I like that reference, you know. Hey, it's not the typical of, it looks like an elephant's ear, It looks cool.
It doesn't look anything like an elephant's ear.
It really does not.
It's just kind of big and flat like an elephant's ear.
It really does not. All right, so I hope Zone 4 hung in there, because I'm going now for hardy to New England and colder now for my next couple of plants. And this is one that I think you and I both fell in love with, that was featured in the magazine as a plant profile. And the name of it is Whistles Saguaro False Cypress. It's a Canicyparis. It's a conifer tree. And we featured this in the magazine, and you and I were just both like, this thing is so cool, because much like a saguaro cactus, it's got arms, like really defined arms, and it kind of looks like it's waving at you. It's so cute.
It looks like if somebody put on a costume of a tree.
And then just
stood
wave their arms
there.
around. Yes.
Like that's what it would look like.
It's a really, really cool cylindrical. It keeps a really tight form, though, for a tree. So I don't know. I don't think that we mentioned this on the small trees episode that we did.
Like the branches go out and then go up, like they have elbows.
Yeah, or like deer antlers.
So like
or
it's always signaling touchdown or surrendering or something like that.
Exactly. And this is zones 4 to 9, so this guy goes really, really cold.
But is that a Western zone 4?
I think it is, but the reason, okay, so let's tell the whole story. So I fell in love with this plant, found this plant when I was out on the West Coast. So that's why I'm going to say, yeah, I think it's more readily known out there. Found it in a 1-gallon pot and decided to take Mr. Whistles Saguaro Cypress on the airplane with me. So I purchased it. And
you named him Mr. Whistles?
Well, I named him Mr. Whistles, yeah. So he was with me, and I had him kind of tucked into the seat next to me, and a gentleman came to sit in the seat in the middle, and he looked over at me.
And you said, "Don't sit on Mr. Whistles."
And this gentleman, he sat next to me, and he was clearly a businessman, and he goes, "Man, I've seen a lot of things on plane before, but this is a first." So yeah, he flew all the way home with me. I planted it, and this is why I wanted this tree, because I have a very tall house, and I wanted to take down visually the height of the house. And this very columnar fastigiate tree I thought would be perfect on the corner of my house. And it was for a year. And I unfortunately sited it a little too close to the house where it was catching the overhang and therefore not getting as much water as it needed, and it died. So it's very sad. I killed Mr. Whistle, but the tree is still super cool, and I think it's something that I definitely want to give a try again. We didn't mention, we mentioned that it was a conifer, but it's got this kind of bluish green cast to it. So it's a really interesting conifer with a great texture too, kind of these scaly like needles to it.
But you had to buy it out west and bring it back on a plane. So you couldn't source it.
You know what? It was an impulse buy. You know, you get out there, you're visiting gardens, you're taking photographs, and I just needed a plant, and that was it, and I brought it home. But I think that I did end up seeing that it was also at Broken Arrow the next year, so that might be where I have to get it to try round 2.
TSA and the flight attendants had no problems with you lugging a tree.
It was really interesting.
It's your emotional support tree.
It was really interesting. TSA, it went through TSA, and I just remember the guy looking at me and going, "I have no idea how to check this," and just gave it back to me. So for future smugglers, that's the way to do it.
I guess so. I'm going to mention actually a North American native that doesn't look like it's native to the eastern part of the country, although it is.
Sweet.
Yucca. The often overlooked yucca for some reason.
Because they are yucca.
They are not yucca when used amongst other low-growing plants. They provide that spiky explosion, that you can use as exclamation points throughout the border. You can use just the pale green one, which is kind of subdued.
That's straight filamentosa.
Right, and then there are ones with yellow streaks down the sides or in the middle, which are nicer. But they do have a bit of a southwestern tropically feel. But when you plant other things around them, they tend to blend in a little better. But zones 5 to 10 on this, they're going to stay about 2 feet tall. Let's not talk about the flowers.
Oh my gosh, they're so ugly. Just cut them off.
That's what I do. They send up a giant candelabra of weird globular white things that a lot of pollinators love, but they really look gangly and strange.
They are so ugly. Yeah. As soon as that shadionkula starts coming up, you just cut that thing off.
Right. It's one of the great things about this plant is that you can't kill it.
No.
And one of the bad things about this plant is you can't kill it.
Yeah.
Because if you decide you don't want it,
good luck.
Yeah, you're kind of in trouble because it's gonna come back. It sends down a nice long root, but it just has such presence in the garden. I mean, that has architecture. It has those thick, rigid, sword-like blades that just stick up, and they look like a green campfire or something like that in the middle of your bed. And they're really the kind of little shot of pizzazz that a lot of beds are missing.
Yeah, I feel like it's the colder zones answer to agaves.
Yes.
That's what I feel like.
Which I thought was going to be on your list, but is not.
I know. I was going to go with the agaves, but, I talk a lot about agaves, so I decided to put it aside. The other cool thing about yucca is it's one of those plants that keeps on giving. Usually after a few years, it cleaves off and it has a couple of babies that you're able to, before they send out the taproots, you can kind of divide them off, pull them off. what I've done and reestablish them in other areas. So, you buy one, you get many. So that's always cool. All right, so I don't want to get letters on this one, but I'm going to mention a Miscanthus, which is known to be an invasive grass. I mean, I basically think that that's its MO now, but there's a new variety.
For listeners who are dismayed by Danielle's choice, I did give her a dirty look when she said Miscanthus.
Well, so here's the thing. There's a newer variety the last few years. It's called Bandwidth, and this is an infertile, been tested for many, many years, infertile Miscanthus, meaning non-invasive. And it's a really, really strongly upright vase-like habit for a Miscanthus. It kind of looks like zebra grass, only smaller. It's got that same green kind of blade to it with a yellowish dot all the way down. So it really looks mottled, which is kind of cool. But very, very strong vase-like habit. No flopping. I mean, that's the usually the second knock against Miscanthus is they tend to flop all over the place. But this guy's only 2.5 feet tall, so he doesn't really have all that much to be able to flop. 1 foot wide, just a really, really cool plant. And this is zones 5 to 9, so we're right in the breadbasket there. And I now have decided that I think that this is going to be that plant for me that I'm going to dot through my long border that really right now I think needs some more structure to it. It just I've got a lot of amorphous looking blobs and really billowy perennials, but I need some more structure, and I feel like that this might be the plant for me.
Or you could use a yucca.
I'm going to stay away from that. Thank you.
The good thing about almost all grasses is that they have good architecture. They're either strongly upright or they make wonderful mounds, very distinct shapes. So, yeah, there are a lot of native options Danielle could have chosen, but no, she opted for the...
I wanted variegated. I wanted, within a certain range, and I wanted something that was tough as nails. And, I mean, that's one thing you can't knock against Miscanthus. It is a tough as nails grass. It grows everywhere.
Yes, hence the
yes,
problem. But this one's benign.
This one is benign. Yeah. This is an infertile, non-invasive Miscanthus, and this one again, it's called Bandwidth, is its trademark name, which I guess it's it's one of these. All right, the actual cultivar name is, you ready?
No.
NCMS2B. There we go. What a great name. Why didn't they keep that one?
Well, I found out that a lot of these names, they can't use the trademark name and the cultivar name because over in Europe, there's already a cultivar
that has that
or something like that. So they have to name it something funky and
then just trademark the name and make it really difficult on the garden editors.
But whoever explained that to me made me feel guilty because I was complaining about why do they do all sorts of numbers and letters? Well, there's actually a good reason, Steve. I'm like, okay. The last plant I want to talk about.
Okay.
Zone 7 to 9, Cardoon.
Yes, all right, truth be told, we talked a little bit about our plants earlier, not all of our final options, and I really wanted you to do that one.
So you're going to let me talk about it? Or
no, I'm going to keep talking about it. It's so awesome. No, go ahead.
Cynara cardunculus, zone 7 to 9. An artichoke relative, essentially pretty much inedible artichoke. 3 to 6 feet tall. It has this silver, jagged, serrated foliage that kind of spikes out.
Huge leaves.
Huge leaves. It looks awesome. It's great for sort of towards the back of a border. So we're talking about a lot of stuff in the front. And this is one where you can cover up the legs of it and have it just kind of stick out behind like mounds of like shrubs that are 2 to 3 feet, and it's going to catch the eye from no matter where you look. So if you want to catch somebody's eye from far away, this is the plant to do it because it's silver. It stands out. Just a great plant. In late summer, it gets like a thistle-like flower on top of it, purple.
Like an iridescent purple. It looks like an artichoke.
Yeah, I grow it from seed. It bulks up, sizes up pretty fast. I have better luck with them in containers and in ground, but people who take more care of their plants might have a little more luck than I do.
You don't take care of your plants?
Have you been listening to the show? And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about personality.
When we speak of a plant's architecture, we are referring to its shape and the effect that has. Shape does much to give a plant its personality, as oxymoronic as that may sound. Some plants are perky, some are somber, some are businesslike, while others are more idiosyncratic. Understanding a plant's personality will help you to use it more effectively because this fundamental characteristic plays a key role in setting the mood for an area. A space for entertaining, for example, could be surrounded by a number of exuberant plants. Where you sip your morning coffee, however, might call for some plants with a more subtle or relaxed vibe. If your plantings seem a touch too formal and serious, add something light, something that pretty much grows where it wants to, like Verbena bonariensis. If you have the opposite problem, with free-spirited plants stretching and flopping around all over the place, give them a few doses of boxwoods, which will help settle things down, much like a punctilious chaperone at a high school dance. They say that people unconsciously choose pets that resemble them. I wonder if in the same way, we gardeners choose plants that match our personality. If so, Danielle's plants are sure to be colourful and insouciant, but still tasteful. Now, I have been to Steve's garden, and if plant choices reflect one's personality, believe me, I really think he needs a good therapist.
Did Peter call me insouciant? I love that. I have no idea what it means, but I think it means cheerful and exciting and awesome.
I can call you all sorts of words that you probably don't know what they mean.
So could I, you little scooch. Who's up next on our expert testimony?
Hi, I'm Susan Morrison, and I am the owner and principal designer at Creative Exteriors Landscape Design in Concord, California, which is about 30 miles inland from San Francisco. Like a lot of designers, I am a big fan of architectural plants, as they are a fantastic way to add year-round structure to a garden, as well as just provide contrast with some of the more exuberant plants, the fluffier plants and the perennials and things like that in your garden. I'm going to share a few of my favorites today, and I'm actually going to divide my recommendations into 3 categories: spiky plants, exclamation points, and sculptural plants. I'm going to start with spiky plants, partly just because they're just a huge personal favorite of mine. And in this category, I'm particularly fond of agaves. One that I use a lot is whale's tongue, Agave ovatifolia. It is going to get anywhere from 4 to 6 feet wide, but it has a lower profile. It's not going to get that tall. And really just some of the most dramatic leaves that you can imagine. They're very wide and they curve upright so that you get kind of a cupped effect from them. And in addition to that fabulous shape, they are just a brilliant silvery blue color. So not only are you getting textural contrast, you're really getting strong color contrast as well. If you don't have room for a plant this size, and I should say that you need to be careful where you plant it because it does have very sharp edges. So you definitely don't want it to outgrow its space, especially if it's near a path or a patio. A nice alternative is agave blue glow, which is only going to get 2 to 3 feet around. And it has more of a spherical shape versus that flattened shape. The leaves on blue glow also are more blue than silver, and the plant actually gets its name from the leaves. Each one has a very thin red margin around it, and when the sun hits the leaves, they look like they're glowing. Both of these plants are very low maintenance. They can take a lot of sun. They are somewhat cold hardy. They can handle temperatures down to about 15 degrees. And one of the things that I really like about them is that they rarely pup. So that dramatic structure never gets diluted by undergrowth. If you're not familiar with the term pupping, pups are little offsets of the plant that grow around its base underneath the lowest leaves. So basically that's the plant babies. Pups are great as a source of free plants, but they're not so great if you want the agave to stay uncrowded and to keep its symmetrical shape. The second category of architectural plants is exclamation points. And what I mean by this are plants with a columnar growth habit and ideally with a fairly tight growth pattern as well. And there are multiple conifers with a shape like this. One of the better known is sky pencil cypress. And sky pencil is a really nice choice for a smaller garden if you want to add some formal punctuation or a more formal note. But it also is a good choice if you're creating a classic Mediterranean garden, because this plant can act as a small-scale stand-in for Italian cypress, which, as you know, Italian cypress just gets massively tall and does not hold on to its shape all that well, and really belongs out in the French countryside because it's just too big for most residential gardens. Another plant that I use quite often to get a vertical effect, believe it or not, is a crepe myrtle. Lagerstromia delta series is available from both the Sunset Western Garden and the Southern Living Plant collections, and it's not a tree. It is actually a columnar-shaped shrub with a very tight branching pattern that will get maybe 8 to 10, maybe even 12 feet tall. And in addition to the strong shape, the other thing that makes it such a stunner is the leaf color. Unlike traditional green-leafed crepe myrtle, the leaves are this really rich, deep burgundy. Now, I think there's maybe 6 in the series, and they come in a range of flower colors, most in that pink to violet category. I have a Delta Eclipse in my garden, and I chose it specifically for the leaf color and the shape. And to be honest, before I saw it in bloom, because in the picture the blooms were very bright pink, I was actually afraid that it was going to look garish when the flowers finally came out in mid-August. But you know what? It turns out it is a little garish, but I absolutely love the combination. The final category are sculptural plants, and by this I mean shrubs or small trees with branches that look like they've been sculpted into curved, twisting shapes. Manzanita, or Arctostaphylos, is a wonderful California native to choose if you want to get this effect, and it's a particularly nice choice because not only do the limbs have that beautiful sculpted shape, but it also has this amazing red exfoliating peeling bark. There are a lot of different sizes of manzanitas. I would probably choose a mid-sized one that can be shaped like a small tree, so a sentinel or a Dr. Hurd if you really want to accentuate that twisty shape. In other words, you don't want to just have it planted as a low shrub because you're not going to really see it. The other thing to keep in mind is that unlike the plants in the first 2 categories, which essentially really don't need much in the way of pruning or special care to look good, sculptural plants like manzanita really require skilled pruning if you want to bring out that shape.
So Steve, at the end of the day, we've got the expert weighing in, we had Peter weighing in, we talked about our plants. I want to know, if you were a plant, what plant would you be?
I would be, I don't know, probably lawn grass. I don't know, something unassuming, kind of out of the way. And
I was thinking a barrel cactus, but okay, that works too.
You would be a barrel cactus?
No, you would be. You're a little spiky, but you're...
Oh, maybe. And you just sit there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
do that. Yeah, like a lump. Okay, I'm good.